Welcome to the Curiosity Crisis. We challenge ourselves to explore the world of business, tech, investing, and science. Get curious and be part of our journey as we discuss, challenge, and learn.
Today, we're joined by Dennis Barnes, CEO of Snowy Hydro, a leader in Australia's energy transition. With decades of experience in the sector, he's steered major companies through transformation, decarbonisation, and infrastructure growth. We'll talk about his career, how he sees the future of energy, and what's next for Snowy Hydro.
So, Dennis, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You've listened before, we know that. So our favourite question to start with, and very on brand for the podcast, is we like to ask what's keeping you curious at the moment?
So what's keeping me curious is my holiday to France in September, where I'm trying to decide how much is downtime, how much is doing stuff, because we've not been for a few years, and there's so much to see and do. Yeah. So I'm curious and spending lots of the weekend looking at shows, exhibitions, restaurants, and thinking, oh, got to book that. And then I go, but I actually want a break, so I'm curious about why I want to keep myself busy when I'm on holiday.
Who gets to make the decisions? Are you travelling with yourself, your partner, or?
So Valerie and I, she speaks French, which sort of helps and doesn't help. I think the one who books it makes the decisions, and I'm the organised one.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, deal with the fallout.
So you've already got a list of...
Yeah.
Okay. Very organised.
In our group of friends, Luke and I are usually the organisers, so we're not getting to pick. But
yeah, we pick usually. Yeah. Now, I have a question about another country. So you're from Manchester.
Yep.
And you're an avid English Premier League viewer.
Well,
and
maybe not avid, but lapsed.
A lapsed and a Man City supporter. Yeah. How do you feel about the season that's just gone? No trophy.
Well, it's
a bit different.
You got to remember, I'm a bit older.
Yeah, so okay, yep.
The first trophy they won in the 2000s was following a drought that went back to 1969.
Yeah, that's long.
So my years were the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. So all of my watching years, going to the games, being a season ticket holders, we didn't win anything, 1 year off. That's
so comparatively.
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay, all right, eh?
Well, we were in the second division for a while, so.
Yeah, true.
So being third in the league's not
scraped back to third. Yeah, there was a little patch there, but okay.
To be fair, Luke and I are both Arsenal fans, and the second places are taking their toll.
Oh, it's tough.
Boring Arsenal.
Oh, jeez.
All right. We're not here to talk football though all day. We do like to dive straight in. So the first question we have for you is: Australia's energy system is in transition. So what do you see as the biggest opportunities and challenges over the next decade?
Well, the biggest opportunity, of course, is to grasp it. Australia's energy rich in all of its forms, whether it's fossil fuels or renewables, wind, solar. Is how do you grasp it? But the biggest opportunity, I think, which isn't fully being captured at the moment, is how do you get people to come along with it? It's that, we're going to be in a much cleaner environment. I've got a friend who owns a place in London, and 10 years ago, you'd go to his place and you couldn't sleep because the buses were rattling by and the emissions from all of the vehicles were terrible. You go there now. Electric buses, electric cars. He's in a flat, so he's not got solar, so he can't participate fully. But, he's really sort of lots of health benefits, a lot of cleanliness benefits. But it comes at a cost. And the biggest opportunity, I think, is balancing all of those, bringing people along. And it's a bit... I would say it's a bit deterministic at the moment. You're in one camp or another, whereas actually we're all in the same camp. So the clue's in the word transition. It's not A to B, it's A to Z. Yeah, and there's lots of paths. There's lots of ways to get there.
So you mean as well in the broader economy, not just do you have rooftop solar? You mean in terms of transportation and everything else?
Yeah, I mean if you move to a renewable consuming system. Relative to a fossil fuel burning system, everything has to change. Some industries haven't got the technology today to make that change. So that's why it's a transition. Making the change is costly and lengthy. That's why it's a transition. But I think if you fast forward to a system which is largely renewable and electric, Australia's got quite a few advantages in, thriving in that.
Well, speaking of the transition and energy and what's going on. I guess in your view, what's missing from the energy conversation? What should people be paying more attention to?
I think it's sort of a similar theme. It's that balance. You know, the World Energy Council talks about the energy trilemma, sustainability, which in their language is more about renewables versus non-renewables, reliability, which is, you know, keeping the lights on, and accessibility, which is a combination of true accessibility. Can you use electricity? And what is the price of that electricity? You got to balance all three. I was in Rwanda on holiday last year, and this might not immediately seem relevant. But Rwanda's got 15 million people. Australia's got 26 million people. Australia's electricity demand is 30 to 40,000 megawatts. Rwanda's 400.
Wow.
Really?
It's incredible. The primary fuel source is wood.
Yeah, right.
People are not living with the benefits of electricity.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, as we transition, we've got to remember other countries are transitioning just to have electricity.
Yeah.
And how do you balance that in the conversation? I don't think there's a good or a bad. I think it's how do you achieve a balance. And I think that's what's missing, actually, a bit of balance. You know, we're trying to achieve a lot. We're spending a lot to try and achieve that. We're, you know, putting energy producing assets in areas that weren't used to energy producing assets. You know, you're moving from your fairly localized coal and gas operations to very widespread, you know, use of farming land and broader landmass to produce electricity. So it's a very complex system we're trying to change. The architecture is changing completely. So how do you get balance in the conversation? It's not one or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's getting the energy from now, it's where it's being produced, where it's getting used. It's very different to, I guess, where it was generated in one particular spot.
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, I heard something this morning which was really interesting. You know, there's that Sun Cable project.
Oh, yeah,
Northern
yeah.
Territory Solar going to Singapore. And solar in the Northern Territory is 1.3 times as productive as it is in Singapore.
Really?
Right.
Because it's cloudy and, you know, along the equator, and more consistent in the Northern Territory. And the electricity losses from the Northern Territory to Singapore are about 30%.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
So what you're actually exporting is land.
Yes.
Yep.
Singapore's not got land for 20 gigawatts of solar panels.
Yeah.
Northern Territory has. And if you can do it on an equivalent energy production basis. So, you know, I sort of off the topic of what does the conversation need. But it just needs that balance. Like, all of that argument about Sun Cable is sort of geopolitical, this madness, big long cables.
Yeah.
But if you actually go, well, you've got a land-constrained country in Singapore who imports fossil fuels. That's what they do. But they want to move renewable. They can't import land, so how do you get the benefit of someone else's land?
And there you go.
So that's how you do it.
Yeah, so the real commodity in that exchange it's the land. It's not
land,
really the energy. I guess the energy is
the currency.
That's the intent. Yeah, it's the currency. Yeah.
And it's a bit like, you can get very philosophical about this, but aluminium in Australia, which is a massive energy consumer, is actually exported energy. Because you know, aluminium smelters have historically been put close to the energy source, whether that's hydro in Canada and Norway or coal in Australia. You're really exporting the energy in an aluminium form.
Yeah.
You also have the raw product here to make the aluminium. And, you know, if we can turn our mind to thinking about that for the future, you know, you're really just repeating a pattern. It's just a different energy source.
Yeah. So I guess our next question, Snowy 2.0, obviously in big complex projects, I think there's a lot of missed nuance. So we wanted to kind of give the opportunity of what's gone right, what's gone wrong, you know, what's been the biggest challenges and some of the notable successes, and just, kind of talk a bit more about what's actually going on.
So, you know, Snowy 2's been worked on for 7 years. I've only had it for the last 2.
Sure.
So, of course, it's been fantastic in the last 2. But I think the biggest challenge and the biggest turnaround we've seen is we're doing something pretty complex in a remote location which needs a global capability bringing to it. And the way you get to do that, I think, is to have an open relationship with all of the people who are building it for you. I mean, there's a great article you can read about how as projects get more complex, the traditional project management methods don't work.
Yep.
It's all about mindsets and practices and culture rather than, again, deterministic things. So Snowy 2, is now in a rhythm of thinking ahead for its risks, working with the various people from around the world. The contractors are Italian, the equipment's made in China, designed in Germany. There's French engineering support. You go to the project, there's lots of Filipinos. It's a global project, as the original scheme was. And I think the greatest shift I've seen in the last few years is that that's being done in a collaborative way rather than a combative commercial way. So I think the biggest challenge wasn't necessarily geology or equipment or COVID stopping us moving people there. All of those things are real and have real dollar impacts. But I think the real thing that was stopping its progress was this coalition of a single team to get it done. And just yesterday, there was the christening ceremony in Shanghai for the 4th tunnel boring machine. Dave was there, who runs the project. He's got a few pictures of it. And that tunnel boring machine, we determined, I think it was last July, that we needed a 4th one.
Yeah.
Because when we get to this particular zone to drill the head race tunnel, we're probably not going to get through it with our existing equipment. I'm convinced that the way the project was going, we'd have found that out in 2 years.
Right, okay.
We'd be in it, stuck, going, oh my God, what do we do now? We need another machine. And you could be in for a disastrous year or two of delay.
Today's episode is sponsored by OptiVenture, the ultimate all-in-one supplement system crafted exclusively for hikers and outdoor adventurers. OptiVenture's unique day and night formulas provide everything you need, from essential vitamins and minerals to probiotics and omega-3s, timed perfectly to match your body's rhythm. The day formula boosts energy, immunity, and mental clarity, keeping you strong and focused on the trail, and the night formula supports deep recovery, reduces inflammation, and promotes restful sleep so you wake up ready for the next adventure. Join the tribe and elevate your outdoor experience. Check out optiventure.co to learn more.
We got ahead of that. This machine's been designed specifically for this zone. Everyone worked together to get it built quickly. It'll get launched later this year. And, in 18 months' time, I might still be sitting there going, oh my God, it's got stuck. But we've given ourselves every chance for it to work. So that's the big challenge and the big shift. Now, I've sort of underestimated and underplayed the 40 kilometres of 11-metre diameter tunnels, the 120,000 segments.
It's close to a record, isn't it?
Yeah, the caverns underground, 2 caverns, you can fit Sydney Opera House in each of them.
It's big.
It's very big. I do keep reminding Dave when he sends these pictures out of the largest, deepest cavern, and it compares him to all the others around the world.
Yeah.
I do remind him that all the others around the world are finished. When it's finished, produce the graph. But it's an incredible project to be part of. I was sort of virtually retired when I joined Snowy. And it was, Snow is great in lots of many ways, but the chance to get my hands on making a difference to Snowy too.
Massive
was
project.
the reason to do it.
Yeah.
Couldn't turn it down. So talking about the success, hopefully looking forward, once operational, how will Snowy 2 interact with the rest of the energy grid, and what's its key value proposition?
Yeah, well, it's interesting relative to the current scheme, because the current scheme was very much about producing constant water flows for irrigators. So it runs in a fairly predictable, to the extent you can predict snow and rain, but it does run to produce 4,000 gigawatt hours a year based on the inflows it gets. Because Snowy 2 is a closed loop and is reactive to all of the other market conditions around it. I would say today any forecast we produce on how it's going to run has actually got massive boundaries, massive range. But if you look at what I think the economics are, and that helps describe how it will run. It needs about $1 billion a year to pay for itself.
Yep.
And about $300 to $400 million a year comes from the provision of capacity when something else isn't there.
Yeah.
So you've got a very hot day or a very cold night, you've got another plant that's fallen over. It's just really the sale of an insurance product to someone else in the market. So, Snowy 2 is great because you can double dip on revenues because it can do that in isolation. But of course, 300 or 400 million is a lot, way short of $1 billion. The other 600 million comes by responding to renewable production. So it'll shift periods of high renewable production into periods of low renewable production pretty simply. And we think it does that quite a lot of the time. So we think it'll be running in one direction maybe 60% of the time.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, so
Especially for hydro.
Yeah, so it's probably going to be running sort of 5 terawatt hours of generation, which is more than the current scheme total.
Combined, yeah.
With 6 terawatt hours of pumping because you lose
Yes.
some energy on the way round. And you don't have to do hard maths. If you do that and you get $100 a megawatt hour spread, you get $600 million.
Yeah.
And that's the basic role and business case for Snowy 2. It's pretty simple. But until it's there in the market in 2029, with all of the other renewables around it, who knows?
Yeah.
I think its biggest value in the energy system as a whole, because there's lots of great components, wind, solar, batteries, battery durations are moving out a little bit. But the reality is 160 hours of storage means you can handle those periods of very low solar and very low wind, which often happen at the same time.
Yeah.
I think it was last May, wind in Eastern Australia had an 11% capacity factor versus an average of like 35.
Yeah.
So that's when Snowy 2 is going to be incredibly valuable.
Yeah, really, really useful, especially with changing weather.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And if you think about it as a business proposition, ignoring the energy transition, the original Snowy scheme is somewhere between 50 and 75 years old, depending on which plant.
Yeah.
It needs a lot of new investment. Snowy 2, when finished, will have good, strong cash flow to reinvest in Snowy 1. It's not dependent on hydrology and inflows because it's a closed loop. So if you actually go, there's a massive market need for it. But actually, there's a great resilience need for our business as we reinvest in Snowy 1. So, I think it was inspired actually in the last decade when, I know the project as a concept has been around a while and pumped hydro has been around for a very long while.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at the proportion of storage expected in 2050, Snowy 2 is 2/3 of the storage.
Yeah.
The rest being in batteries.
And batteries, yeah.
So you have to ask, is it enough? I mean, it's a massive, massive project, as you said, 2.2 gigawatts and 160 hours of storage. But is that enough for the grid?
Well, I mean, there's been some reports that say you need, 7 Snowy 2s.
Yeah.
And of course, there was the projects that are partly underway or cancelled in Queensland. I've been in the energy industry since the early 90s, and I've sort of got a bit of a historical interest in it. It's a technology industry. And pumped hydro's technology hasn't changed materially for a long time because it's not had to.
Yeah.
Because in lots of parts of the world, coal stockpiles, gas storage facilities have been more economic forms of energy storage. So pumped hydro hasn't had lots of it being built, but not massive technological improvement investment. I think the scale of the transition will mean that other technologies will fill the gap.
Right.
I had no idea what they are, whether batteries go from 2 to 4 to 12.
Yep.
There's thermal salt storage, there's compressed air storage. So I actually think if we were to think about another Snowy 2 now, another Snowy 2, 3.0, whatever,
Yeah.
recognising they take more than 10 years to get approved and built, you'd actually be putting technological risk in your thinking. Whereas 10 years ago, you didn't. But I think there's so much money globally going into the energy transition. And the hardest bit to solve is what Snowy 2's doing.
Yeah.
I think actually technology will solve it at some point. And some of that technology could just be, if you think about the energy system today and the benefits of smart meters, AI, and, a demand response system,
Yeah.
that could solve it.
Yeah.
So I think if we were to think about it, then you'd be going, are there other technologies that could fill its place? Having said that, Snowy 2, if you were to build that amount of storage in lithium-ion batteries, would cost you $130 billion.
Yeah. And a hell of a lot of mining and a lot of
Yeah.
land and
Yeah, they don't come without their own
There's
construction
some
challenges.
other risks with those too. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm a believer that, if you go back far enough, the energy transition that was occurring 100 years ago was how do you get coal plants to go from 10% thermally efficient to 50% thermally efficient? And now the energy transition is saying how do you get, firming to work, keep the lights on.
Yeah.
I think there's a long way to go on consumer energy resources on this.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Well, speaking of that and then other markets and what else is out there, you've worked across the UK, Contact Energy in New Zealand, here in Australia. What lessons have you taken from each and what stands out as a differentiator for energy for the countries? You already talked about Rwanda, like being completely different to Australia. So does anything really stand out uniquely?
Well, you got to remember they're, Anglo and Commonwealth countries. So they come from the same systems. Post-war boom in generation build. In New Zealand, it was hydro.
Yeah.
In Australia, it was coal and gas fields. In the UK, it was everything, including nuclear. So all three countries have got the same problem. Period through the 90s and the early 2000s of low demand growth and low desire to transition. And a period now where a very strong desire to transition, old plants closing, and industry knowledge having gone. So all of that's the same. What's quite different is in the UK, obviously, interconnection is huge.
Yeah.
It's very easy to, there'd be half a dozen gas and transmission lines connecting to the continent, which is not great if Russia cuts off your gas.
Yes.
But it's great because France has got massive oversupply of nuclear, so there's a security there. I mean, the UK has been through a recent huge transition with government support, but experienced very strong increase in electricity prices. New Zealand's a bit different because it's small. It's smaller than New South Wales.
Yeah.
And the big difference, again, it comes back to technology and engineering. It's a long, skinny country. Most of the resource in the south and the people in the north. So their challenge ends up being a bit different. But they're all market-based, which I think is slightly different versions. I think markets can provide the most efficient response. When I look at other countries, there's not one country alone that you can take lessons from. You've got to look at all sorts of countries. Even in the UK, in the US, there's half a dozen market models.
Yeah. Disaggregated across.
And a lot of it's political, where do you want the cost to sit? In the market and with the consumers, or in your tax? Because if a government sponsors something, it just affects there's money in, money out.
It's being paid somewhere,
It's
right?
being paid somewhere.
Yeah.
Not huge amount of difference between those three Commonwealth countries.
Just jumping in for a quick break. We'd love it if you did us a favour and gave us a 5-star review on your podcast player. We'd really appreciate it. It helps grow the podcast and get to more ears. Thank you.
Do you think we look at the energy transition a little bit incorrectly? How we see it as, we're trying to get to net zero, right? But should we really be looking at like an abundance economy where energy becomes really cheap? Are we looking at the equation wrong, I guess?
I mean, we currently haven't. We've had an abundance economy of, brown coal, black coal.
Sure,
gas.
yeah.
I think short-term trading prices for gas now are, whatever it is, $10 to $20 a gigajoule. The first contracts out of the Bass Strait were 20 cents a gigajoule.
Wow.
Wow, that's cheap.
I
I didn't know that.
And I know inflation will have made the 20
Sure,
cents, not
sure.
20 cents. But if you look at Victoria on the back of gas and brown coal, you know, it's got a big manufacturing base. Not got cars anymore, but cars, steel works, you know, aluminium smelters. That was an abundance economy. You know. You drive investment in manufacturing on the back of cheap energy, and you build your economy that way. I actually, you know, the Future Made in Australian slogan program, shouldn't call it a slogan, it's a program, he's actually trying to turn the tide on that to say we could have an abundance economy. But who pays on the way through? That's the challenging bit.
And I guess it's also the chicken and the egg, right? Is it like, does the industry come first or the energy, or is it somewhere in between?
The reality is there's a role for governments. It's pretty simple. If the long-run marginal cost of something, building a new thing, is lower than the short-run marginal cost of the thing that you've currently got, then they'll swap out. But at the moment, brown coal is $12 a megawatt hour for your operational costs, and wind farms are approaching 10 times that. So it's that. So governments have to help to bridge the gap. Transition the older producers respectfully. You know, people get jobs and go to the new economy. But, you know, frankly, current technology would suggest that some industries are just so hard to shift from fossil fuels.
Yeah, we did an episode on this actually, like the easy.
Yeah, we did.
We looked at the whole of, I guess, the global economy and looking at getting to net zero and what the major sectors are, and there was just easy ones and hard ones. And obviously nothing's easy, but some have a path. Some can be, you know, decarbonised, electrified, all that sort of stuff. I did want to ask you about that, given, you know, how massive the target is, and you've talked a little bit about, you know, global experience and different countries. How do you see the trajectory towards, you know, net zero or where we're going?
I mean, there is, you know, I think there's hope. Everyone wants to look at 82% electricity from renewables by 2030. 2030 is tomorrow, you know, like pretty close. So I think there will be waypoints where, you know, we won't look like we're on track. But then if you look at the overwhelming support of the government and investors, I think the trajectory is actually pretty good. The last 5 years have actually sort of driven a bit of alignment. That's what you need. Certainty is elusive. But the direction of travel is really strong. You know, net zero is a bit of a get out, and it's a very hot topic at the moment. Of course, you know, the role of offsets. You know, I'm not an economist, but, you know, if you had a global price on carbon, then all of it would get solved, because you would actually see the right initiatives happen in the right places. You know, the lowest cost producers producing and manufacturing base in there. But I think that's just that's gone. You know, global price on carbon is not a thing that's going to happen. I mean, I do, just back to the other topic, I'm allergist originally. And I did my education in Sheffield in the 80s. And home of steel, that's where the blast furnace was invented. First blast furnace I saw was Whyalla in South Australia.
Really?
Because in the 80s and 90s, it was clear in the UK that the economy was no longer an energy and manufacturing economy. You know, all the, you know, love it or hate it, manufacture, you know, saw that and sort of knew that UK coal was going to be needed to be subsidised so much that you would bankrupt the country. And the UK's economy has actually shifted, but it's like that's 40 years to a much more service-based economy with a lot less manufacturing. I actually think Australia has the opportunity to have a bit of both.
Okay,
attractive place to live, people want to be here, and abundant renewable resources which can manage that transition a bit better.
Oh, that's great. So our next question is about your experience as an energy leader. And I guess comparing today to maybe 15 or 20 years ago, you know, what do you think makes a great energy leader, and kind of looking at that comparison?
I'll tell you a funny story. My first job in electricity was sales.
Yeah, right.
And the job was to make more sales than the gas board or the coal board.
Okay.
So you'd actually turn up on a housing estate, and the housing estate was council run. The tenants had been given a choice when their houses are refurbished.
Yeah.
So you turn up in a truck and say, "Would you like to buy would you like an electric fire or a gas fire or a coal boiler or whatever it was?" So, the industry's gone from, that's 40 years ago, 30 years ago. The industry's gone from a very simple, produce it, sell it, keep producing more and selling more, and that's how you make money, and that's how you give people the benefit of energy. Like I say, there's parts of the world where people don't have that benefit. To one which I think is actually at the heart of society, So as a leader now in energy, it's often commercially owned, not government owned.
Yes.
It's often, in lots of cases, not in a lot of Australians' cases, an international game, not a local game. And it's often about putting the consumer first. So that example 35 years ago on a council estate in Wigan, no one was thinking about what was right for the consumer.
Yeah.
Just got sales targets.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Incentivized.
Yeah. Well, no one told me that in Wigan, which was an old coal mining town, that if you worked for the coal board in the UK, you got 12 tons of coal a year for life. So they all went coal.
Right.
So it was a fruitless exercise. So I think the big shift has been this focus on the consumer.
Yeah.
The consumer's also the voting public. So the role of a leader in the energy industry has become incredibly important to balance all of that. It used to be simpler.
Yeah.
You dig stuff up, you'd sell it. It's now you've now got to take all of that into account. It's
Yeah.
quite a nuanced role.
I guess, and the product is really, it's fundamentally changed. The amount of financial products that, as you're saying, you're not selling the, dig thing up, sell it. It's, the actual market's changed.
Remembering that most people don't give a stuff. Like,
Yeah, it's true.
They just want their life.
As long as the switch works, it doesn't matter.
Work, Is it costing me more? And
Yeah.
I mean, that is changing as well. I mean, it's been a big change for me going from listed companies to working for a government business.
Yeah.
I've seen and respected a lot more the challenge government has in managing this change in the energy sector.
Yeah.
Whether it's, 70 years ago it was change to connect people. Like, Australia was 10 million people in the 60s. They needed to invest to connect people to electricity and build power stations. Commercial enterprises were probably not going to do that on the hope of immigration.
Yeah.
To now they're actually trying to help consumers understand that, for the good of the planet, we've got to transition.
Yeah.
And we're going to help you with that. It's given me a lot of insight I didn't have before into that challenge for government. And remembering, governments topple when the lights go out.
Yeah.
There's a few examples of that overseas, yeah.
We talked about that a while ago as well.
Yeah, we did. It was,
Yeah. Now, Dennis, we're getting close to time. So our final question is, I mean, you're the CEO of Snowy Hydro. You've been a leader of a company overseas. You've travelled the world. You moved from the UK over here. So you've done a lot. But what we always like to finish on with a guest like yourself is, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Well, you never grow up. Men never grow up.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. I actually really like being retired.
Yeah, okay.
It was really, I got COVID trapped for a year in New Zealand. I did nothing for a year. 20 kilos lighter.
Oh, wow.
Better read.
Yeah.
I used to say 10 kilos, but it's actually near to 20.
Yeah.
Better read, it's... So, and, been with my wife Valerie for 30 odd years. We didn't kill each other, so that was cool.
Nice.
So being retired and interested probably is the thing I want to...
Staying curious, even.
Staying curious.
Oh, we love that.
Yeah. You put the words right into it.
That sounds like a very good time, but I think Luke and I have got a long time before then.
Yeah, we've got a bit still, I think.
You've probably got a few more years than me, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all we have time for. But before we go, we just want to say a massive thank you for coming on the show. Thanks for your time.
Thanks heaps for coming on.
Yeah, it was good.
Awesome.
I look forward to listening to it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.
Smashing. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Find us at curiositycrisis.com and Curiosity Crisis on Instagram. We're on all major streaming services, so you can listen how you like. We have to ask a favour. If you got anything out of this episode and are getting value from the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review on your podcast player. That helps us be found by more listeners, and it helps grow the podcast. So thank you, and catch you on the next episode.